It began like any other Friday night in our apartment. Music low, lights warm, and the faint smell of popcorn clinging to the air. We were three guys who had somehow turned a small rented space into a home that felt both chaotic and safe. Reed Lawson was the kind of person who filled silence before it could exist. Confident, unpredictable, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Brooks Tanner, on the other hand, was calm, deliberate, with a quiet humor that anchored us when Reed's energy spun out of control. And then there was me, Noah Callan, the observer in the room, the one who noticed everything but rarely said much. I used to think our friendship was simple. We joked about work, played video games until midnight, and sometimes ended up talking about life until sunrise. But lately, there had been something else beneath it all, a pulse I couldn't name. Reed had a habit of leaning too close when he talked, his laughter always brushing the edge of something that felt like teasing and something more. Brooks noticed it too, though he never said anything. His glances lingered longer than usual, quiet, watchful, almost afraid. That night, Reed decided we should celebrate his promotion at work. He brought home cheap whiskey and a playlist full of old songs we all pretended to hate. "Tonight," he said, raising his glass, "we forget about everything boring and act like we're alive." His grin was contagious, and even Brooks, usually the sensible one, gave in. Within an hour, our living room was alive with laughter and off-key singing. I stayed a little behind, sipping slowly, half enjoying, half studying them. The way Reed's smile softened when Brooks talked. The way Brooks's hand always seemed to hover near Reed's arm like a secret he couldn't admit. By midnight, the celebration had turned messy. Brooks had passed the stage of coherent sentences and was sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, smiling at nothing. Reed, flushed and swaying, was still determined to pour another round. "You're a terrible influence," I told him, taking the bottle away. "Me," he said, grinning. "You love it when I'm bad." He said it like a joke, but something in his eyes made it sound like truth. I tried to laugh it off. "Come on, let's get him to bed." Brooks mumbled something about the room spinning. So we helped him up. His arm draped around my shoulders felt heavy, warm. Reed stumbled beside me, humming an old song. We managed to get Brooks into his room, where he immediately collapsed on the bed. Reed leaned against the doorframe, his shirt clinging slightly to his skin. "I think I'm next," he muttered. "But man, I spilled half that drink on myself." He looked down at the wet patch on his chest, then at me, and laughed softly. "Guess I need a shower before I smell like a brewery." "Maybe you should sleep it off first," I said. He shook his head, unsteady. "Nah, I'll just rinse off." "Don't worry, I'm not that drunk." But a moment later, when he tried to walk, he nearly tripped over the rug. I caught him by the arm, steadying him. He blinked at me, his eyes unfocused but strangely open. "You always catch me," he whispered. I didn't know if he meant it or if it was just the alcohol talking, but for a second, it felt heavier than it should have. When we reached the bathroom, Reed was still laughing at his own clumsiness. He turned on the shower, and steam began to fill the small space, curling around the light. "You can go," he said. "I got it." But when he fumbled with his balance, nearly slipping, instinct took over. I reached for him again, my hands steadying his shoulders. The moment stretched, too long for what it was. The sound of water hitting tile filled the silence between us. Reed's laughter faded into something quieter, almost thoughtful. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable flicker beneath the usual confidence. "You're good, Noah," he said softly. "Better than people realize." I didn't know how to respond. The steam blurred everything. The edges of the room, the lines of his face, the meaning behind his words. I told myself it was just drunk talk, but something about his tone didn't sound drunk at all. I helped him steady himself, made sure he was fine, then stepped back, the warmth of the steam clinging to my skin like a secret. Before I left, I glanced back once more. Reed was standing under the water, eyes half closed, his expression unreadable. When I turned off the light and walked down the hall, I found Brooks standing by his door, awake after all. His eyes flicked from me to the bathroom, then back again. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look on his face was enough to tell me that something had shifted. Something fragile and invisible had just cracked between us. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of the shower still running. My mind replayed everything. The laughter, the closeness, the strange tenderness in Reed's voice. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a moment between friends caught in a haze of alcohol and care. But deep down, I already knew better. Some moments don't disappear when the night ends. They linger, haunting the spaces between what was said and what was meant. And as the sound of running water finally stopped, I realized that something had started that night, something none of us were ready to face.
The morning after felt quieter than usual, like the apartment itself was holding its breath. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, while sunlight crawled lazily across the floor. I found Reed already in the kitchen, hair damp, wearing that same grin that made it impossible to know when he was joking. Brooks sat at the counter, spooning cereal without saying a word. The air between them felt sharp, invisible but present. "Rough night?" Reed asked, his tone light. "Could say that," Brooks muttered, not looking up. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Reed laughed it off and turned to me. "You were a hero last night, man. Thanks for saving us from ourselves." He said it casually, but the words carried weight. I could feel Brooks's eyes on me for just a second before he looked away again. I tried to sound normal, just making sure no one cracked their skull open. That's what roommates are for. Brooks didn't respond. The rest of breakfast passed in small, empty sounds, the scrape of a spoon, the click of a cup against the table. When Reed left for work, Brooks finally spoke. "What happened after I passed out?" His tone was cautious, but there was a current beneath it, a question he didn't want to ask directly. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Reed was drunk. I helped him to the bathroom, that's all." He studied me for a long second before nodding.
"Right.
"Of course." But the way he said it made it clear he didn't quite believe me. The next few days felt off balance. Reed acted like nothing had changed, joking and talking as if the night had been erased by the sunrise. But Brooks grew quieter. He spent more time at the gym, came home late, and avoided both of us. I caught him once, standing in the hallway outside Reed's door, staring at it for a long time before turning away. Something unspoken hung in the air between the three of us, a thin thread ready to snap. Reed, oblivious or pretending to be, kept finding ways to close the distance between us. A brush of his hand on my shoulder, a teasing comment, the kind of moments that felt harmless on the surface but carried a spark I couldn't ignore. One night, while we were watching a movie, he leaned close and whispered, "You know, you looked after me like someone who actually cared." "I did care," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know." The room went still. The glow of the screen flickered across his face, and I couldn't tell if he was serious or just playing another game. Then he leaned back, breaking the spell. I exhaled slowly, my heart unsteady. Brooks walked in at that exact moment. He saw how close we were sitting and froze. Reed turned, grinning as if nothing was out of place. "Movie night. You joining?" Brooks's expression hardened. "No," he said flatly and walked out. The door to his room closed with a soft thud that felt louder than it should have. Later, when Reed went to bed, I knocked on Brooks's door. He opened it just enough to look at me. "I didn't mean for things to get weird," I said. "They're not weird," he replied too quickly. "You can do what you want, Brooks." He cut me off. "Just tell me one thing. Are you sure you know what you're doing?" The question lingered long after I left. I didn't know what I was doing. Every time I told myself it was nothing, that Reed's teasing was just how he was, a part of me still waited for something real to hide beneath it. A few nights later, Reed knocked on my door. It was late. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. He leaned against the frame, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Figured you couldn't either." He wasn't wrong. I let him in. He sat on the edge of my bed, mug in hand, his expression softer than usual. "You ever feel like people think they know you, but they only see what you let them?" "All the time," I said. He looked down, voice low. Sometimes I think people only like the version of me that's loud and funny. But when I stop performing, they disappear. His honesty caught me off guard. I'd never seen him so open. You don't always have to be the loud one, I said quietly. Yeah, he murmured, glancing at me. You say that like you actually see me. The silence that followed was too intimate to be comfortable. The space between us shrank until I could feel the warmth of his breath. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he smiled faintly, breaking the tension. You make it hard to know what I'm thinking, Noah. Maybe that's fair, I said, trying to smile back. But my pulse betrayed me. The sound of a door creaking in the hallway made us both turn. Brooks was standing there, half hidden by the shadows. His expression wasn't anger. It was something quieter, more painful. He didn't say a word. He just looked at us, then turned and walked back into his room, closing the door firmly behind him. Reed sighed, rubbing his neck. Great. Now he's mad again. But I wasn't sure mad was the right word. Brooks's eyes had looked more like betrayal, or maybe heartbreak. I felt it twisting in my chest, the realization that whatever had started that night was no longer something I could pretend to ignore. After Reed left my room, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Every small sound in the apartment felt amplified, the hum of the heater, the soft creak of floorboards, the faint echo of Reed's laugh from earlier. I kept thinking about the way Brooks had looked at me, like I'd crossed a line he thought I never would. I wanted to believe I could still fix it, that we could go back to the easy laughter and late-night talks we used to have. But deep down, I knew something had changed in ways that couldn't be undone. By morning, the silence between the three of us had grown heavy again. Reed acted normal, like always. Brooks barely spoke. I tried to hold the fragile balance together, pretending everything was fine. But every glance, every unfinished sentence, every awkward pause told the truth neither of them would say aloud. Something had begun that night in the steam and shadows of the bathroom. Something none of us could name, but all of us could feel. And as much as I tried to deny it, part of me knew that whatever came next would break someone's heart, maybe even mine. The silence that settled over the apartment wasn't ordinary. It was the kind that carried weight, the kind that held every unspoken word hostage. Days passed in fragments, the scrape of a chair, the sound of doors opening and closing, the clatter of dishes without conversation. Reed acted as though nothing had changed, humming while he made coffee, tossing jokes into the air that fell flat. Brooks kept to himself, headphones on, his laughter now reserved for someone else's world. And I, caught between both of them, felt like a ghost haunting my own home. One evening, I came back early from work. The living room was dim, lit only by the fading light through the blinds. Reed was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside him. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes, something unguarded. You look exhausted, he said. Maybe I am, I replied, dropping my bag by the wall. He motioned for me to sit. You know, I've been thinking about that night. I froze. For weeks, we'd both avoided naming it, pretending it was nothing. Hearing him mention it out loud made my chest tighten. What about it? I asked carefully. He swirled the ice in his glass. I don't remember everything, but I remember you being there, taking care of me. His voice softened. It felt different, like I could actually trust you. I wanted to believe that was all he meant, but the look in his eyes said more. Something about the way he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, made the air between us feel too thick to breathe. Reed, I began, but he interrupted. I'm not trying to make this weird. When you're around, it feels easier. Like I don't have to keep pretending. His honesty disarmed me. I'd built walls to keep everything controlled, but they began to crack under the sound of his voice. Pretending about what? I asked quietly. He hesitated, then smiled in that lopsided way that always made him seem both charming and dangerous. About who I am. About what I want. Before I could reply, a voice came from the hallway. What's that supposed to mean? Brooks stood there, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Reed straightened, the moment dissolving into tension. Nothing, Reed said quickly. Just talking. Brooks's eyes flicked to me, then back to him.
Right.
Just talking. He turned and left, the door to his room slamming hard enough to rattle the picture frames. The sound hung in the air long after he was gone. Reed sighed, setting his glass down. He's been acting like I did something wrong. Maybe because he thinks you did, I said. Reed glanced at me. You think that too? I don't know what to think anymore. My voice came out quieter than I intended. He stood, pacing a little, restless. I didn't mean for things to get messy. Sometimes I feel drawn to people, and I don't know why. It's not calculated. Brooks likes you, I said. You know that. Reed paused, his back to me. Yeah, he said after a long moment. I know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, the flicker in Reed's eyes, the way Brooks had looked at us. Everything felt like a slow collapse, inevitable and unstoppable. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Reed again. He looked uneasy, standing in the half-light. Can I come in? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted him to. He sat down on the edge of my bed, hands clasped together. I told Brooks earlier that I might have caught feelings for someone, he said. I didn't tell him who. I swallowed hard. Why tell me? Because I think it's you. The words hit me like a wave. I should have said something sensible, something to stop the room from spinning. Instead, I just stared at him, caught between disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. Reed, you're drunk, I said finally. He shook his head. Not tonight. I mean it. His eyes searched mine, waiting for something, permission, maybe, or forgiveness. I know it's complicated, but you can't deny you feel something too. And I couldn't. The truth was written all over me. Every late-night conversation, every fleeting glance, every heartbeat that stumbled when he was near, it all led to this. Without thinking, I reached out. Our hands met, hesitant, unsure. The silence between us felt heavy, like we were standing on the edge of something neither of us could come back from. Then a sound shattered it. A soft click, the door, slightly open. I turned, and there was Brooks, standing in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide.
He didn't speak.
He didn't have to. The look said everything. Reed jerked his hand away, guilt flashing across his face. Brooks's voice came out hoarse. You told me it was him, that he started it. I froze.
What?
Brooks's eyes burned with hurt. He said you tried to take advantage of him that night, that he was too drunk to remember. I looked at Reed, stunned. You said that. Reed opened his mouth but said nothing. His silence was louder than any answer. Brooks shook his head, stepping back. I thought you were different, Noah. I defended you. I told him you wouldn't do that. His voice cracked. Guess I was wrong. He left before I could explain, the door slamming behind him like a verdict. When I turned back, Reed looked at me with something close to shame. I didn't mean for it to sound like that, he said weakly. I just didn't want him to be mad at me. I felt my chest tighten with disbelief. So you lied? He took a step closer, eyes pleading. It got out of hand. I panicked. I stared at him, my voice breaking. You didn't just panic, Reed. You made me the villain.
He didn't respond.
The silence stretched until it hurt to breathe. That night, I packed a small bag. Reed didn't stop me. Maybe he knew he couldn't. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the dark window, a blur of someone I barely recognized. Outside, the air was cold, sharp against my skin. I kept walking, past the flickering streetlights, past the sounds of laughter drifting from other apartments. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay where trust had been twisted into something unrecognizable. Some betrayals don't arrive as explosions. They arrive quietly, disguised as confessions, wrapped in half-truths. And as I reached the corner, I realized this wasn't about what Reed had done. It was about what I'd allowed myself to believe. The night swallowed the street behind me, and for the first time in months, I didn't look back. The morning after everything changed felt heavier than any hangover I'd ever had. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, sharp and accusing, and I could hear only the slow hum of the refrigerator and the echo of what happened last night. My heart pounded against my chest as I sat at the edge of my bed, trying to piece together what we'd said, what we'd done, and what it meant now. Caleb's door was half open. I could see his shoes kicked to the side, his phone on the desk, his bedsheets tangled. But he wasn't there. I swallowed hard, afraid to ask myself whether he had left because of me or because of what happened. My body remembered his warmth, the way his voice trembled when he said my name, and the look in his eyes that felt like both apology and confession. I moved quietly to the kitchen. The smell of coffee lingered, and Mason was there, leaning against the counter, staring at the floor like he'd been standing there for hours. When he looked up, his eyes were red, the way they get when he's exhausted or pretending not to feel something too deeply. "Hey," I said softly. He gave me a nod, barely audible. He left early. Didn't say where. I wanted to ask him what he thought that meant, but I could tell by the way he tightened his jaw that he was thinking the same thing I was. The silence stretched between us, full of words neither of us were brave enough to say. Finally, he exhaled. "Last night. I don't even know what that was."
Do you?
I didn't. All I knew was that something had cracked open inside me, a space I didn't even know existed until I saw the way they both looked at me. It wasn't just confusion. It was longing, fear, guilt, all tangled together in one impossible knot. "Mason," I said, forcing the words out. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I didn't mean for." He interrupted, stepping closer. Don't act like it was some mistake. I saw the way you looked at him, at both of us." I froze. His tone wasn't angry, just wounded, as if he'd been carrying that thought for longer than last night. He continued, his voice shaking. "You think I didn't notice? The way you protect him? The way you flinch when he's hurt? Or how you light up when he laughs? You think I didn't see it?" The words hit hard, cutting through the fog of guilt. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Mason looked away, his shoulders tense, and for a moment, I thought he might walk out too. But then he said something I didn't expect. "I liked it too, you know." The room went still. He looked back at me, his eyes searching mine. "I like being close to you. I liked knowing that maybe, for once, you needed me as much as I needed you." There it was, the truth that had been building beneath every shared laugh, every long night on the couch, every almost touch we'd both pretended not to notice. It wasn't just about last night. It was about everything that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. Before I could say anything, the door opened. Caleb stood there, his hair damp, his shirt unbuttoned halfway. He froze when he saw us, the tension in the room as thick as the morning light. "Morning," he said flatly. No one answered. He set his keys down and looked between us, his eyes flickering with something, jealousy, maybe, or regret. Then he leaned against the wall and sighed. "So, are we going to pretend nothing happened?" I looked at both of them. The people I'd shared everything with, meals, laughter, nights of drunken honesty. But this was different. This had changed everything. "Mason," I began. "Caleb, what happened last night, it wasn't a game. It wasn't just helping or joking or..." I trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "It meant something."
To me.
Caleb stepped closer. "To which of us?" That question broke me a little, because I didn't know. They had both become parts of me I couldn't separate, the quiet steadiness of Mason, the restless fire in Caleb. And now, I was standing between them, holding a truth that might destroy us all. Mason ran a hand through his hair, looking at the floor. "You don't have to pick," he said softly. "Just be honest." But honesty was the problem. Honesty would break something I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. "I don't know how," I whispered. Caleb let out a bitter laugh. "Then maybe we all just forget it." The air in the room thickened, heavy with things unsaid. He walked toward his room, his shoulder brushing against mine. It was a small touch, but it carried more weight than words ever could. When his door closed, Mason finally sat down. I joined him. Neither of us spoke. The silence was different now, not empty, but full of the ache of knowing. He turned his head slightly, eyes glimmering in the faint light. "You think things can ever go back to normal?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head.
No.
"But maybe they're not supposed to." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Guess we'll find out." And just like that, he stood and walked to his room, leaving me alone with the echo of his words. I sat there, watching the morning drift into afternoon. The apartment still smelled like coffee and regret, and the silence felt like a wound that would take time to heal. But beneath it all, there was something else, a flicker of hope, faint but alive. Because even in betrayal, even in the confusion and pain, there had been something real in that moment between us. Something neither of us could erase. I didn't know what would happen next. Whether Caleb would forgive me, whether Mason would stay, or whether any of us could face what we'd become. But for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. The world was still moving, indifferent and alive. And somehow I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a story none of us had planned, but one we all had to live with.